What's up, Eugene? You're listening to the Eugene Morning Hustle podcast, brought to you by the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. We're your hosts, Brandon Miller and Ivan Torres, and like us, we know you'd like to know what's going on in your city, socially, economically, civically, and culturally. From events to guest interviews and professional and personal development tips, each week we bring you stories of local business owners, advocates, leaders, and everyday Eugenians sharing how they've strengthened their roots to reach a little deeper in our community, and how you can too.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Eugene Morning Hustle podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking to Andrew Robinson, an expert in professional and leadership development. He's been putting together a new style of conference that we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be learning a little bit about Giant and what they have to bring to the table.
Yep.
So
looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it. This is awesome. Yeah. I love what you guys are doing.
So what is the problem that we're trying to fix?
Well, when it comes to professional leadership development, I think your listeners obviously are the experts on this. So I would ask them to consider, when it comes to their professional lives, what are some of the sources of friction? What are some of the sources of frustration? The things they go home at the end of the day and they're like, oh my gosh, if I could just change this, I would be so much more excited to go to work tomorrow. And it may not even be necessarily a source of friction. It could actually be an opportunity. So, a number of leaders I can think of in our community who they see these opportunities that they're wanting to capitalize on. But that too is a source of agitation because they're like, okay, how can we make the most of this? How can we capitalize on this? And so if I'm putting myself in your listener's shoes, I'm guessing a lot of it comes down to those kinds of challenges. So, when I'm meeting with leaders, I hear a lot about how do we attract talent? How do we retain talent? How do we engage talent? As our workforce ages, how do we build succession planning? How do we actually equip our leaders with practical skills? Those kinds of challenges that are often coming to the surface. So I think those are the kinds of things that they're wanting to solve for. Those are the kinds of challenges that they are wanting to address in order to capitalize on specific opportunities.
What kind of solutions are you bringing to the table for that?
It depends on what their specific challenges are. At the end of a lot of the conversations, not surprisingly, it comes down to people. People are, any owner will tell you their single most important asset is the people that work at their company, their organization, right? And so what we're looking at is how do you fundamentally invest in your people? And it's interesting. I was in an executive meeting yesterday with a group of leaders, and we were talking about one of the things that differentiates in Giant, we talk about leaders that you want to follow versus leaders that you have to follow. And I think the three of us could sit here and make a list of those people, right? And all of your listeners could make a list of who are those leaders in your life that you wanted to follow and who are the ones that you had to follow. So we were having that conversation, and with this really interesting fold in the conversation where someone said, the CEO was like, I think there's a big difference between leaders that extract from their employees for the leader's own benefit. And then, and he was thinking of how he has observed that. And then there are those leaders that unlock their employees. Huge difference. One, I think it's the difference. One is extracting value. It's almost like an ore, right? Versus the other is unlocking value that was there all along. And that's the work that I get to see every day is like, hey, that was within you. And now this is actually coming out of you, and you are availing yourself of these gifts, these insights that are enabling you to express yourself more, but they're also bringing more value to the company. But that's not extraction, right? That's expression. It's a big difference.
Can a leader go from extracting to unlocking? And what are some of the steps that they could do for that?
Yeah, I think that's a deep, that's one of those deep questions that leader has to address.
It's probably very specific, right?
Yeah, and it's almost like it's a philosophical question that they have to address for themselves. If a leader is driven by self-preservation, they're always going to essentially try to take what's theirs, right? Because it gives the illusion of safety and security. Of course, it's not safety and security, but they think, a little bit more money, a little bit more, then I can be more secure and life will be more predictable. Of course, that doesn't necessarily pan out. And then versus I just feel fortunate. This team I was with yesterday, literally around the table, this executive team, totally different mindset. It was, how can we give as much as possible to our employees? How can we commit to unlocking them? And so a lot of our work is in them unlocking themselves, but I can't talk them into that. And that's what I love about my work, is I get to work with people. I'm not talking them into it. They already want that. And so this group in particular is committed. Honestly, I mean, hey, look at Dickens, look at Scrooge, right?
Yeah. No, it's
like,
good point.
What happened in his life? He had an existential crisis, and unfortunately, for some leaders, that's what it takes to suddenly sit up and go, "What am I doing?" And they have essentially almost like a moral revolution that reorients their perspective on the people and their employees, and it's a beautiful thing to watch if and when it happens.
And they have to want to change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And so there's a huge incentive. And in some cases, that is what sets the table for this kind of existential crisis, is especially in the marketplace today. If you don't invest in your employees, if they don't feel like you truly care about them and know them and want to unlock them, there's just too many other options.
You might have heard or seen this before, but when I've heard it before, where employees don't leave their jobs, they leave their leadership, right? Is that something that you believe?
We talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
I was with another leadership group, and literally that came up.
Yeah.
And we said, what we know is the research would seem to indicate that they're not leaving your company; they're leaving your managers, your directors. So what can we do to build leaders that they want to follow, they want to show up and work with and for? So absolutely.
How much influence does an employee have with leadership?
So much more than most employees realize. Right when you said that, a specific person I work with came to mind. And the way that he is leading his team is sending shockwaves up, down, and sideways through the org chart.
Wow.
Everyone's watching, going, "Whoa, game on!" Right? So I think there are a lot of people out there. If they're not, your listeners, if you're not the owner, the president, the CEO, there's so much leadership that you can adopt in your current role that will essentially call others up to a higher standard. It's amazing to watch.
Middle managers, for example, a lot of times they're the ones doing a lot of the heavy lifting within the company and that sort of thing. And that's where problems can arise as well with leadership, of course. How can you tell if it's the problems in leadership are stemming from the very tip top, talking CEO, founder, to middle managers, to sub managers and employees? How can you tell in an organization where that lies? Is it always at the top?
Well, when we start working with a company, we make it really clear to the executive team that your employees cannot pass your level of leadership. So you will either create space for them to grow into, or you will actually inhibit their growth. And so what we're constantly encouraging them to do is outpace their employees in their own development. And a lot of my consulting coaching is on helping those executive leaders be able to outpace their employees, be able to set the bar and create space for their employees to move into. Otherwise, you get a situation, and I have seen this happen, where the trailer starts passing the truck.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the employees are like, wait a second, if they're not, why aren't they bought in? I'm bought in. And you see the managers, the directors growing, and then they're looking at the executive leaders like, okay, well, if you're not into this, then either I'm not going to be into this or I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right. So I was just thinking, this sparked an idea about leadership giving their employees permission to grow. Right?
Absolutely. And it has to be something that they model. And I'm thinking of specific leaders here in town that I get to work with who will get up in front of their entire companies and be able to share what they are doing personally, how they structure their day for their own growth. And in so doing, they don't even know, I don't think, how much they're modeling and mentoring employees by saying things like that. It's really powerful. So permission, I think, is that's a great way to put it.
And you're basically talking about leading by example,
100%,
right? And that a lot of leaders don't see that in themselves. They're just doing what they do, and that ends up being kind of that model for their employees.
That's right. And I think what I see in the truly extraordinary leaders that I get to work with is they have this ability to, a few things. They have this ability to work on their business, not just in their business. They don't just get sucked into the day-to-day. They actually have disciplined themselves to work on their business. And part of working on their business is working on themselves. And so that's a huge piece of it. And what that translates into is this perspective on investing in their employees, where they don't see it as an expense, they see it as an investment. And that's one of my differentiators. I mean, I will say that to the companies I get to work with is, if this ever becomes an expense, then we need to have a conversation, because this is an investment. I mean, can you imagine making an investment and you go to look at, how it's performing and you're like, well, it's going up or down.
Yeah.
And when it comes to employees and culture and leadership, it needs to be an investment. It needs to be something that's actually showing a measurable return.
How would a leader go about investing into their teams or employees and growing them?
Well, one of the things that the threads we're following is ultimately it is being able to see that as an investment, right, not an expense. They need to be committed to working on their business, not just in their business. Those kinds of mindset, those commitments will sustain them. So let's say that someone wants to invest in their employees. And by the way, listen, I just want to commend the leaders in our community and their commitment to their employees. Like I said, the work we do is we are just helping them do that better. We're not trying to talk them into being committed to their employees. They already are. We're just helping them to do this in an effective way. So I have a gold standard that I look for, and it's easy to remember. It's S squared, M squared. So the two S's stand for scalable and sustainable. So the question is your leadership development approach, is it something that is actually sustainable? Meaning, does the effect have a short or long-term measurable effect? So if you impact your employees, is that something that you see carry on over months and even years? Or is it just a short uptick? So the gold standard in my mind is it has to be sustainable. And ultimately, my goal with every company that we work with is that they will adopt this for themselves. So they're not dependent on an outside person like me. And everyone listening to this that owns a business will know the truth of what I'm about to say. You cannot outsource your culture.
Yeah, that's right.
You just can't outsource your culture. I've worked with some companies in town here for 4 years. I'm pretty comfortable. I just came from one of them. I know everybody. Hey, how's it going? I'm still not part of their culture. So my goal is to give them the skills to build a sustainable approach to developing their leaders and their employees, which leads to the second piece, which is scalable. So a lot of leadership development focuses almost solely on the top leaders. On the one hand, that's fine because of the influence that top executive leaders have. But how much more effective would it be if the people at the top and the people on the very front line have the exact same leadership language, tools, vocabulary, skills? So the work we do brings everyone in the room together. So let's say we do a once a month all company session where they're learning the same tools and language. And then you start walking through the company over time and you hear people starting to use the language, refer to the tools. And of course, that starts driving business outcomes, which leads to the first M. So we've done S, and now M, which is measurable. I mean, so much of leadership development is it effective? I don't know. It makes us feel good. Well, okay, but you have business outcomes that you're trying to drive here. And in fact, I saw a recent study through McKinsey & Company that said that of the leaders they surveyed, 11% said that their leadership development program was effective. And I'm sitting there going like 1 out of 10. So immediately the analogy that came to my mind was, can you imagine ordering 10 computers and one of them works?
Yeah.
That's the current perception of leadership development among leaders. So for what we do is we have actual metrics that we use to measure performance over time. So one company here in Eugene, they started at 59% capacity. So that's 1 percentage point above average. So this I think will be interesting to your listeners, that the average percentage of performance for teams is 58%. So let's think about that. That's 8 percentage points shy of basically having 2 people do the job of 1. And a lot of leaders get into that cycle of, we have a problem, let's throw more people at it, right. And it actually grows their problems, their challenges by multiples. So with this particular company, they started at 59%, and then by the time we worked together for, I think it was 18 months, 24 months, we test every quarter, and they got up, I think, to 94%.
Wow, that's a big change.
Okay, so that's one thing. So great, we can see the metrics on that, but then what they can do is they can actually cross-reference that with their profit and loss statements and their production statements. So this is actually a manufacturing company. The manufacturing companies keep track of hours, and the CEO came to me one day and he's like, okay, well, you might want to know that we've actually quadrupled our output without adding any staff. We haven't added any capacity. This is literally the exact same group of people. We've just learned how to work more efficiently. Quadrupled their output. And I was like, okay, this is incredible. So that's the M. But so many people I talk to, they're not necessarily measuring the impact. Are you doing like an employee engagement survey that you can actually measure some sort of relationship between what you're doing for your employees and some sort of outcomes? And there are a lot of companies in town that do that. So that's critical. And then the last one is probably the last M is quite possibly the most overlooked advantage that a company can have, which is the marketability of your leadership development program. If you have an incredible, sustainable, scalable, measurable leadership development program, do you have any idea how many employees are looking for that?
Yeah.
Including your own? Like, market this first to your own employees. Like, this is what we offer you. Here's how to make the most of it. Here's how this can transform your life, right? And then you use it for recruitment. Hey, you have someone that's looking at 4 or 5 different options, and they look at your company and they're like, hey, oh my gosh, you offer this? So this happened with a company right here in Eugene where they were recruiting a high-level leader that was looking at 3 other options and actually chose Eugene. It was the lowest paying of the 3 options, but he chose it because they have this installed within their culture. He's like, I want to become a better person, and I can become a better person by actually working with you. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, what an opportunity.
No, that's incredible.
And so those are the kinds of things that I get, passionate about with helping the groups I work with implement that.
Now, I just want to touch on the subject a little bit more. So things I've heard throughout my working career from companies and employees and things like that is that Well, if we if we offer some program like that, they're just going to learn all that stuff, then they're going to go somewhere else. So we don't want to invest in our employees that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure you've heard that before. What do you say to that?
Yeah, again, because I've done this for so long, immediately I have stories come to mind of employees that were lured away for higher pay, and they boomerang. They're back because they're like, I can't even. The culture of where I went compared to where I was is so different that I please let me come back. I'll take the lower pay. Because they calculate the net cost, right? A higher paycheck doesn't translate to a higher net cost if it's taking a toll on your life. And so those are the consistent stories I hear. Lots of other examples of, no, if you are investing in your employees, it actually encourages them to stay. It encourages them to want to deepen their engagement. There are considerations, particularly you'll get more success if they have room for advancement, of course. So investing in your employees and providing room for advancements is critical, and other factors. But no, I think there's no downside that I've seen to investing in your employees in that way. And by the way, I think again another specific leader just came to mind where her husband actually said, like, you can't leave that company, and she's like, why? She's like, because you're a different person because of what you've been involved with in that company. And because this work doesn't just impact their professional life, it fundamentally impacts their personal life. So I could write a coffee table book on all the stories that I get to hear about how it affects.
I'm ready to read that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the program. What is it called? A company hires you, you come on. What is that?
Yeah, so we work. So Giant is the name of the company, and so we have a really, I call it an arthroscopic approach, because anyone listening to this knows, like, listen, I can't afford to send my leaders away for 3 days or a week and so forth, which is part of the problem of leadership development right now. And so what we do is we come along and say, let's actually come in. This is very arthroscopic. We're gonna meet for like an hour every other week. The technology within Giant enables the leaders to actually get the content independent and in anticipation of our sessions. So it's a flipped classroom, if anyone's familiar with that. So they'll actually do the content leading into the group. So the group I met with this morning, they'd already watched, we have like 7-8 minute videos where they learn the tool, the leadership tool, and their exercises, and it just walks them through it, which they appreciate because they're extraordinarily busy, and it just walks them right through it. So they're done in 20, 30 minutes. And then they show up to the session, and what we spent the morning doing was just an hour of application. Okay, what challenges are you experiencing? How would this apply to what we're going through? And we go out the door with specific actions that they can take. And I think that's something else we could talk about, because that is, I think, a differentiator in the approach that we take. There's so much emphasis and so much leadership development on inspiration and information, not as much on transformation. And the difference between information and inspiration and transformation is perspiration. So a lot of Asians in there. But if it's like anything else. If you don't translate your inspiration information into specific actions, they're not going to go anywhere. Yeah. And I'm guilty as anybody. I read this thing, or I watch this TED Talk, or I read this book, or go to a conference, I get excited, develop all these amazing intentions. And I'm sure your listeners can relate to this. What happens,
Absolutely.
Right? You go back from the workshop, the conference, you feel like, oh, this is it. This is going to be incredible. And you come back and you check your email and you're like, wow, I didn't know my inbox was this big.
Yeah.
Or you have, 55 unanswered texts, and all of a sudden the tyranny of the urgent closes in on you, and all of those inspirations, all those intentions go out the window. So what we do is like this morning, we don't leave the room until you have specific measurable actions. What are you actually going to do? And really emphasizing, and I think this is critical, is these small but powerful actions. You can look at James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. None of these are like, don't be a hero. Just just a small action. I had one leader say, I'm going to take every team member over the next 2 weeks out for a short coffee. Came back, he's like, oh my gosh, this is what I needed. We were drifting, but it had to be a specific action, because he had to come back and say, did you do it or did you not do it? And if I had any admonition for anyone listening in on this, it's translate this into specific measurable actions, okay? If you want to go the next level, what we do is build in accountability. So accountability is key in terms of you and I following through on what we say we're going to do, right? And you have that built into a lot of really, I think, powerful technology in some ways, like Strava, if anyone's familiar with Strava, or you have this accountability, this like social kind of thing. But we go even further, which is, Ivan, if you and I are partners and you're going to keep me accountable, it's one thing for me to write down what I'm going to do. It's another for me to tell you what you're going to do. And it's another for me to ask you to hold me accountable. And then we go to what I would say is the platinum standard, which is guess who's going to report on how well I did at our next session? You are, not me. You're going to go here, hey, Andrew, he fulfilled his commitment, exactly what he said he was going to do, or nope, he didn't. Maybe I was sick for a week or something, or maybe I just blew it off.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that accountability that you were talking about, because you are having this accountability, you have respect for the person that you're having holding you accountable, right? So you don't want to let them down,
mm-hmm.
right? And so it sounds like that's part of it, right? Where it's like, I wrote it down, that's one thing, but when I tell you that I'm going to do this thing and you're going to report back, I don't want to be the one that says we didn't do it, So, yeah.
And I think it was you that said it outside of this, that even just telling somebody else, it just jumps up the chances of you actually following through.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the numbers wrong. So if your listeners fact check, you will find out these are not accurate, but they are give or take 5 percentage points. Okay, so with that, I think when you write something down, it's about 15%, and then essentially doubles. So if I tell you, it doubles, let's say to 30. If I ask you to hold me accountable, we get to 50. And what I'm talking about is the chance that I will actually do it. But if I actually ask you to hold me accountable and then ask you to report on how well I did, it's an 80% chance that I'm actually going to do it. And so that's what's transformative, is you have to have the perspiration. So if I could change one thing about the current state of leadership development, it would be let's a little less talk, a lot more action.
Aside from Giant, I hear that you and your team have built a new style of conference that you bring in here to town. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called LeaderCore, and we're starting in Eugene, and it's actually branching out to other locations around the country. So I think Norman, Oklahoma is next week, and then Nashville the following week. So we're really excited about it. But yeah, it's a different approach to leadership development. It's really designed to complement a lot of the good work that the chambers are doing here in town, and some of the other events. YP is and all the different efforts in town is just meant to complement that. And what we saw was like, wouldn't it be nice to have just a regular rhythm where people could every quarter go into a session, a LeaderCore session, and we view it as CrossFit for leadership development. So you show up, and listen, I hope people get some inspiration out of it. I really do. Not anti-inspiration, but what I also know about the leaders that we work with is they want something practical. What do I actually do? Okay, we learned this tool. I see it. That's really powerful, but what am I going to do about it? And so what we do is we send people out the door with a really practical step they can take, or several steps that they can take. So that's the model. So we meet once each quarter, and then that's a live session, and we spend that time going through a tool, a practical leadership tool. It's highly interactive. Our commitment to the audience is to not, you're not there to hear us. You're there to actually help each other, and so we won't talk for more than 7 or 10 minutes, and then it's all your time. Let's go. And so we're there to facilitate that process. And it did catch me off guard, I have to say. I think it really is meeting a need for people that are wanting something that they can really sink their teeth into. That is, inspiration's great, but again, we're really aiming for transformation. How do we move the needle on leadership in the community? And my ultimate hope is that we would be able to see that leadership intelligence, if you want to call it, the LQ, increase over time, because leaders in different sectors throughout our community are learning the same language, the same leadership tools, the same vocabulary and approach, and they're starting to scale that within their own companies, but then also through their own sectors.
The way that I'm kind of envisioning this is that this provides clarity in action.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the problem. The problem is that, yes, you're getting the information, the inspiration, all of that, but there's no clarity on what the action is.
Great point.
And that's what everyone wants,
right,
is the action, because that's the reason they're there.
That's right. And
hopefully.
I think a lot of people can relate. Again, I was talking with a leader, and she had come back from a conference, gone for a week. All the top name speakers, you name it, they were there. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I had a front row. It blew my mind. It was unbelievable." I was like, "That's great." And then we were talking, and I said, "Well, how has this affected like your team? How do you translate this to your team?" And you could just see her go, "Oh, well, I've been really busy."
That's a great question to ask.
And I was
Yeah.
genuinely like, given the impact this made on you, how has this translated to your team?
Yeah.
And it's no fault of her own.
Sure.
I'm the same way.
Right.
We're all the same way. We have the best intentions. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what? Can I see your receipts from that trip? Like, if we could, your expense report from that trip, it's thousands of dollars. And so part of LeaderCore is, what if we brought world-class leadership development? I mean, this is stuff that Fortune 100 companies are doing, but just bring it to Eugene, Springfield. So you can just come to Graduate and access it on a morning and go back to your job. You don't have to fly across the country. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on travel. You can just come here and get this, and then we're going to do it again next quarter. And then what we're going to start implementing is, between those sessions, if people, let's say the two of you are like, "Hey, this is great. We love LeaderCore. We want to go a little deeper." Well, we have a cohort model where you can actually join in with a group of other people that want to grow, and we're going to go through a 3-month series on a particular topic, and so you can engage with that, and it's just an a la carte model. But again, let's make this as accessible and dynamic and agile as possible, so that people aren't having to go away and miss work and have to come back and spend a week trying to catch up, and then not even implementing what they learned at the conference. So that it's meant to disrupt that pattern.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, I tell you, man, this is like huge, because I've been to hundreds of conferences, and I have never once been to one of those conferences that sparked me to taking action, right? Inspired as hell. Felt great for a week, but I can't say that I left there and continued my life and put steps into place that actually changed anything. And what you're doing is a hands-on approach that's really giving the clarity to these actions that should be taking, because at those conferences, you're left thinking, okay, so how do I do this, right? And why should we be paying thousands of dollars traveling around the world to go sit there and then wonder how to use any of this stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So really practical. At the last LeaderCore, we went through one of Giant's core tools called Support Challenge Matrix, okay? So by nature, we all tend to either be high support people or high challenge people. That's just, one way or another. And so we went through that tool, and everyone identified their tendency, which is the real nexus of leadership, is how aware are you of your own tendencies? How well do you know what it's like to be on the other side of you, is the question we always ask. Do you know what it's like to be on the other side of you? Well, once you identify your tendency of support challenge, you can identify, okay, well, this is how I need to bring the other. So, I don't know, are you guys right-handed, left-handed? Right-handed. So if I asked you to sign your name right now, the three of us would all do it right-handed. Now switch hands and you do it with your left hand, right? That's what we're trying to get people to do. It's like, you're going to do the support or the challenge, whichever comes natural to you. But leaders that truly liberate others are able to bring equal parts. So what we sent people out the door with is, okay, what's your action? If you're a high support person, Brandon, then what are you going to do to bring challenge? How those employees are leading, how are you going to bring more challenge to those people, and give it a specific action, right? We're going to tie that to, hey, I've got this employee that's showing up late to meetings. I'm just going to let it slide. That's, that would be more of a high support approach. Okay, that's great. What are you going to do to address that? So if Ivan is a high challenge guy, then it's the opposite. It's okay. You're bringing all that challenge to this employee, and you're noticing they're kind of closing off or clamming up. So what would it be like for you to listen? How can we actually give you some skills on actually listening to that person? So the simple task might be, in our next meeting, I'm gonna ask 3 questions, good questions, or I'm gonna ask them about what they did over the weekend. Do some small talk, which a lot of high challenge people are like, they just want to get to business, right? Yeah. So those are the kinds of practical actions. So the question I will always ask, and this is we can all ask it of ourselves, is how will you know you've been successful? Like, if I'm watching you do this through a plate glass window, or I'm listening to a transcript, will I be able to actually check the box that you did it or not? And so we're really that level of granularity.
When is your next one coming?
Yeah, so the next live in person is in September 19th. And so September 19th at Graduate, and we're going to be going through one of the most foundational tools at Giant, which is the 5 voices. And some of your listeners are familiar with that. So we're going to be going through 5 voices, and that's going to be the focus, is that power tool. Now, what we're going to do in between that on August 1st is we are actually going to combine all the locations on a virtual call. So just a 1-hour call. And so people that join in will be with people from different parts of the country and who have gone through some similar content. Although if you weren't at the last LeaderCore here in Eugene, you can still join in that call. You won't miss a beat.
Who should go to that conference?
I would say any person that wants to develop themselves. Any person that sees or has a desire to grow, to develop, to create more influence within the workplace or within their lives.
Regardless of the industry they work in, regardless of the title they carry, regardless of where they see themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. To your point earlier, we're talking about leading up, right? Yeah. So if you're a CEO, come on, join the call. If you're a manager, great. This is universally applicable. And this gets into team performance. So anyone that's listening in that runs a team, works with a team, or is on a board, or whatever it is, anytime where multiple people are involved, the question is, how do you get a high-performing team? And as it turns out, there are 5 metrics to high-performing teams: communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity. By human nature, we typically focus on execution and capacity. Get stuff done. Come on, guys. Don't you know what the strategic plan is? We know the objectives. Why aren't you doing them? Come on. And then I double down on execution, right? When in fact, 90% of the effectiveness of a team are the other 3 variables: communication, relationships, alignment. And so 5 voices kicks off communication. We literally each have different leadership languages. And so when we understand that, we can actually work more cooperatively, more effectively. So that's why that's so powerful. The other thing I don't want to get lost in this conversation is that we're human beings.
Yeah.
If what we've talked about sounds a little bit transactional, like we talk about measurements and scalability and sustainability, that's because anyone that's listening to this that runs a business or is involved with a business, they understand that this has to move the needle, right?
Yeah.
So I can point to all kinds of examples where this work moves the needle. And so that's what we've been talking about. But in the end, these are human beings, and I don't want that to get lost. These are not cogs. This is not an industrial, plant. These are human beings, and ultimately, the most powerful thing is the presence that we bring to the room. So, if I'm listening, one of the 3 questions that we will often encourage leaders to ask is, do you have anything that you're trying to prove? Do you have anything you're afraid of losing, or do you have anything you're trying to hide? So think about those questions, and I will literally ask myself those questions in the car on the way to meetings. Because I'll catch myself like, oh, geez, I am trying to prove something. Okay, let's not do that when I go into this meeting.
Yeah.
How about not?
Right.
Because I don't like how I show up when I'm trying to prove something or, trying to hide something or afraid of losing something. It changes my presence. And that's, I guess, one of the things I want to make sure comes through in this conversation is that it really is who we are as people and the presence that we bring to our work that impacts people. And it is what they will take home. It's the impact, the imprint that you will leave with them. These tools that we use with the companies that we work with, they're tools. They're just tools. Powerful tools that show results, but it really depends on who's on the other end of the tool, right? You could hand me all kinds of construction tools, and I'm still going to struggle to build a house the way a genuine, contractor can do it. So the tools don't do it; it's the person on the other side of it. So just want to make sure that your listeners are appreciating that they really do. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's true. They have this within them. The question is it in a vault or is it something that's been unlocked? And so much of the work that we do and the things I get to see on a daily basis is really seeing what happens when that vault gets unlocked. It's just incredible to watch.
That was a really great message. And it really just it's just so good to really take the moment and really understand what the person across from you is getting, and like understanding how you deliver it. That example that you gave earlier was really good. So, do you have any examples or just success stories of some of these companies?
Yeah, I mean, I could share lots of personal examples, like I alluded to earlier, and those are critical. I mean, and here's how incredible the leaders I get to work with are. They'll literally say, like, if this was costing me money, I'd still do it because of their commitment to their employees. Think about that. Like, they're like, I don't care if this is making us money, but I would do it anyway because I care about my employees. So that's the starting point. Although, I mean, I've literally heard that come out of the mouth of one of the leaders I get to work with. So I'll use an example from that company. On the flip side, the ROI of what this translates into, because I think everyone out there is probably thinking, what's the ROI on leadership development? And in many cases, there is none. And that's the reality. There needs to be. And, in the medical practice, there's do no harm, right? Well, I think in the work I do, it's like do some good. Like, you have to do good. I feel like I'm ethically bound to make sure that my clients see a return on the investment. Because I know that along the way they're going to transform the personal lives of their employees. But one recent example that comes to mind is I was working we do a lot of small group work with leaders, and one of the leaders in the group, again, we're sitting there at the end of the session, and it's, okay, what are you actually going to do to apply this tool? So every week we do a different, really simple tool, and then let's pick a really simple action that you can take. Okay, I have these 2 employees, he said, and they're not getting along. So I'm going to take this tool, I'm going to apply it to this one employee, and we're going to talk through it. And again, this is not monumental. This is not that, like, this isn't clearing your calendar or going away on a wilderness retreat or anything, right? Nothing wrong with those things. They're great. But this is just having a conversation with your employee that would not have happened if we hadn't really challenged him to come up with a specific action. So he takes the tool, meets with them. We come back 2 weeks later like we always do. Like, great, how'd it go? He's like, well, I shared the tool with this person. In so doing, realized he was about to leave the company. Okay, so that turned up that. But as we started addressing the conflict and going deeper using the tool, what this employee realized is that really this conflict had a lot to do with his own insecurity. Okay, wasn't actually about the other employee. So once they resolved that, he comes back, he's like, once we resolved that, these 2 employees start getting along and they're like friends. They're like, by learning this, the impact that this had in this one employee, then unlock this other employee. So hopefully everyone's following this interesting triangle here, right? And so he came back, he shares that, and I'm like, okay, let's tease that out a little bit, because there's a lot more going on here than you realize. So first of all, you saved an employee from leaving. And I said, how much was the salary on that? And he was like, he's probably $90,000 employee. So what Gallup would say is that the cost to anybody that's listening to this of an employee leaving your company is between 100 and 213% of their salary. That's Gallup, and it ranges wildly. So I'm just using round numbers that Gallup produced. So I said, let's just go low end. Let's say that's like 125% of his salary. So now you're going from his $90,000 salary. You just saved, it's probably, let's say $130,000 maybe you saved the company. Okay. Now let's talk about the productivity. Have you noticed any increase in productivity between those two employees? He's like, oh my gosh, night and day, like double. Okay. So for every hour, they are getting more productive, right? Which is the measure of productivity. I talked with an economist the other day, and he was saying, really what we're looking at is GDP over hours when we're talking about economic growth. He's like, oh my gosh, these two employees are producing per hour far more than they were when they were at each other, right? He said, but what surprised me is how it's affected the entire team, because teams organize around conflict. So the whole team had organized around conflict. Well, once they saw these two employees getting along, and unlocked the team, who's now performing at a higher level. And so I said, okay, one last question for you. How has this affected your job? And he starts laughing. He's like, oh my gosh, I don't have to babysit anymore. Like, he's a high-level leader who is having to do lower-level work to try to deal with this conflict. And I know people listening to this know what I'm talking about. Because they're like, why am I getting pulled in to do this work? So he's like, I'm actually able to do higher value work because of helping these guys reconcile, right? So you step back and you actually, I'm sure there are people listening to this that are like, I do want to know the ROI. So I'm going, okay, look at the salary. He saved an employee. That's $130,000. Okay, now I have absolutely no way of measuring the productivity of those two employees that are now getting along, let alone the dynamic on the team, nor can I measure how this has freed up this higher level leader to do higher level work. But it's north of $130,000. Let's just safely. So I was like, how long did that conversation take? He's like, well, it was the better part of an hour. I was like, okay, so conservatively, that's $130,000 an hour. Like that you just literally put back into the company because you saved this employee from leaving, not to mention the increased productivity. So, I think that's where this just takes on a whole nother level. And what we're talking about here is bringing out value that's already within the people. We didn't steal that value from anybody. It was within those people in that story. And this process just helped unlock it. That's all.
Communication.
Yep. Single most important metric.
Yeah. I got tons of questions, but I am excited to have Andrew on a part 2, if you're up for it.
Absolutely. I think this is fascinating. I mean, this is I think, and what excites me is about the impact that this can make in our community. I get to see it in different companies, and I start thinking, what if this really started making a systemic impact in sectors within our community, and then collectively what the economic impact and lifestyle and all that. So I absolutely would love to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. It was really interesting to hear all of that. We are going to link all of the future events that are coming up, that at least the ones that are planned, in the description below. So definitely check it out. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks for doing this. This is, I think, a huge asset to our community.
Alrighty, everybody. So we are to the part of the show where we get to know our guest a little bit better. So Andrew, are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
All right. When you're not at work, what do you like to do?
I love to fly fish. Yep. I've got a drift boat, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but McKenzie River drift boats were, as the name might indicate, invented on the McKenzie River. So I have a McKenzie River drift boat, and that is my favorite thing to do.
Is that your go-to too?
That's my go-to. I also enjoy writing and playing music. So guitar player, enjoy singing. And I have a strange fascination with golf. I love golf. Meaning, like, I just am constantly just thinking about the mechanics and things like that. So, yeah.
Do you think it's very much a mental game?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
It mirrors so much of life. So we'll be playing and just having these really powerful life conversations on the golf course.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoy it. So
yeah, I've heard it can be a form of almost meditation in some ways because you're so present.
it's true. And yet, like with fly fishing, people are like, oh, that's so beautiful, it's so elegant. Oh my gosh, it's probably one of the most frustrating things you can do. I mean, once you get it down, it is incredibly therapeutic, and you get into that flow state and forget about everything else. So, and where we live, come on, like,
yeah.
I went with two of my closest friends last Sunday, and we just floated all day. And it was like, at one point I was like, oh my gosh, all these things that have been occupying my mind all week, they're gone. I hadn't even thought about them. So we live in just a really special place for that.
Now, with your music, have you ever recorded any of them?
I have. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, quite a bit. I had a trio a number of years ago, and we have a studio, like an EP that we did, and I have a little studio at home that I enjoy recording on. I'm not meaning to sound like I'm, a publishing artist, but I just love it.
That's super cool. I mean, it's it's a passion for sure.
Yeah.
What genre?
I suppose you'd probably, everything comes out sounding country. So I was raised by family that was from the Midwest of Canada, out in the prairies, and somehow that kind of prairie style country music makes its way into the strumming and the lyrics and everything. So
very cool. Ivan earlier was just he was humming some music, and I was like, what are you humming? And it was country music.
Yeah,
I love country music.
it is. Yeah, in our house, a lot of that's playing, but I also love my Radiohead and
of course, yeah,
deep cuts on that. But a lot of it's in our house is Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash and John Prine.
Classics, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and it's cool. It's my daughters have picked that up, so it's pretty cool. They
awesome.
play that around the house. So yeah,
that's awesome. What was the first career you dreamed of?
The first career I dreamed of. Oh man, Ivan, I wanted to be a surgeon. Oh my gosh, I wanted to be a doctor. And I had a colleague that was a trauma surgeon at OHSU, and I was like, hey man, can I come watch like a surgery? And he's like, yeah, come on up. And we went to the surgery. I washed up and everything, and went in and watched. I won't go into details, but I about passed out. And I was like, this is not the career for me.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
So it's.
So did you go to school for any of that?
I was a biology major through my undergrad, and then went and saw that, and I was like, I need to pivot. So yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. No.
I would faint. I couldn't be in the same room. Nope. Not my thing.
Nope.
Takes a special person.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna restrain myself and not share the sights and smells, but it'll do you in.
If you did, we'd have to accompany it with imagery on the video.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we'd have to censor it.
Splice it in there. Yeah.
What has been the most impactful leadership conference that you've attended, and why?
Oh man, I will say, so with the company I work with, Giant. Honestly, the annual gathering that they put together for me is the most impactful, and it is because you are among people that call you to a higher level. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into one of them, because so much of our work is in the space of personality intelligence and emotional intelligence, right? So everyone, by definition, is obsessed with that. So if you walk into a room, and if you could somehow measure someone's personality intelligence and emotional intelligence, it's like the average quotient across the room is like off the charts. So you walk in, and it's just buzzing with people that are just really fascinated with how humans tick, and committed to self-awareness, and so I would say that. And then even just from an operational standpoint, just getting input from colleagues, and I had last September was transformative. It will forever go down in my life. And so to answer your question, Ivan, it'll be September 2023, and that conference was life-changing. So, yeah.
What is something that surprises people about you?
I'm a bird nerd. Since I was a little kid, have been fascinated by birds. So I actually taught the course on birds in 7th grade to my field biology class. The teacher was like, Andrew, why don't you just come up and teach it? And I was like, absolutely, hold my Sprite. So that stuff's super fun. I'm just fascinated by birds.
Yeah.
I was on a call the other day, and on a Zoom call, and I looked over the screen, and we have a cherry tree, and I was like, oh my gosh, can you hold on for a second? And I grabbed my binoculars in the middle of a Zoom call. Like, yes, I knew it. It's a cedar waxwing. They're passing through, and I was like all excited about it. So hopefully your listeners, we haven't lost your listeners yet, but little peculiarities like that. A lot of things that I do, and my kids will just be like, Dad being dad. Yep.
What was your last impulse buy?
This is old. 7 years, 8 years. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
Okay. I bought a 1988 right-hand drive Toyota Land Cruiser from Tokyo.
Whoa.
I did research that forever. It's a diesel. That was fun. I still have it. My daughters drive it. So that was kind of like a little odd.
You had it imported and everything?
Yeah.
Wow.
It literally showed up on a truck from Los Angeles, and they dropped it in front of Costco on is that Chad? Yeah. Right in the middle of the road. I was like, well, there's my truck.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received is probably from a mentor of mine that said, what's happening within you is far more important than what you're doing in the world, which other people may not agree with, but that has served me well. If I get so preoccupied with what's happening outside and making an impact and all that, I distance myself from my own self. And as a fundamental premise, I try to remind myself that who I am, who you are, who your listeners are, is really what we have to bring to other people. So his reminder of that, he just every once in a while, hey Andrew, just remember, what's happening within you is really far more important.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
And I've never looked at it that way, but I think that's something that I'm going to be thinking about tonight when I'm laying in bed and thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah, because it's so easy to look outside of ourselves and go, I want to solve that problem, I want to fix this, and it just grounds me. And again, you can go too far with that. It's not about being navel-gazing or being self-absorbed. But I think it's an important lens to begin with.
Yeah, powerful advice. So my question, and this is one I love asking everyone because everyone has a different answer. What is a hidden gem in Eugene that you would recommend to somebody else? It could be a retail restaurant, it could be a restaurant, a brewery, winery, it could be a park, it could be anything along those lines.
Can I use a friend's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So apparently he's raving about this coffee van on South Willamette, in the Market of Choice parking lot there. And he keeps talking about it. And I'm like, okay. I don't get to that part of town usually, but I'm sorry to the proprietor that I can't remember the name of it. But apparently this is like crazy, incredibly good coffee. So in a town of coffee places, I was impressed that this one rose to the top. So I would not be surprised if another one comes to mind. I'll let you know.
Well, between now and when this airs, we're going to do our research and we're going to find that truck and we're going to make sure
put
we
a link in
there in the show notes.
That's a deal. That's a deal.
Yeah, and I also want to go to it because I'm also a coffee nerd, so I'm all about that.
It's funny because we just had an episode about not spending money on coffee.
Oh, did you really?
We did. Yes, we did.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
That's funny, yeah.
It is what it is. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Yep, really appreciate it.
So when was the last time that you went to a conference?
That's a good question. I would say the last time I went to a conference was in March.
Oh, 2 months ago.
Of last year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I usually go to at least one or two a year, but I haven't gone to any this year.
Do you what was it about?
Well, it was a voiceover conference, and it was great. A lot of industry peers, a lot of information, but there wasn't a lot of incentive. I don't know about incentive, but there wasn't a whole lot of like, here are the action steps next. Though, some of the speakers would say, here's my email address, or go to my website, or email me, things like that. But I don't think, what would have been nice for that conference at the very least would have been to been given like, okay, so here are some possible actions that you could take after leaving the conference to at least spark an idea of what I can do with the information I learned, and take it with me and do something with it. But that was never talked about.
So you had multiple sections at this conference?
Yeah, it was about a lot of different genres within the voiceover industry, and different ways to kind of grow your business, I guess you could say. And but there was no like somebody like orchestrating the conference, saying, okay, so remember, when you're at this conference, you're going to want to make sure that you keep this in mind, write this down, take into account these actions and put those actions into place when you get back home, right? And I mean, yeah, I had to fly to Georgia for it. I spent thousands of dollars to do it, and I felt like it was a big mixer for industry professionals.
Yes, exactly that. The last conference that I attended, the last big conference that I attended, was down in LA for the Adobe Max conference.
Sure.
And honestly, just the experience was amazing. Getting to be there around just people in the same industry that are just so much better at what I'm doing, and just getting to hear the tips and tricks and all of these things. But it at the end of the day, it really just felt like a floodgate of information. Everything just dials out, and then getting back home and like, what did I really take away? There was just so much that you almost lose it, right? And I had pamphlet and binders and little books that I was given, and
yeah, I had those too.
And just like Andrew was saying, you get back and 150 emails and all of the other things that you now have to catch up. And what I did was I just put them on the bookshelf, and a year later I haven't touched them at all. So it's just like, man, and not saying that it was a waste of money, because I definitely learned some things.
Mm-hmm.
And but I kind of like what he's doing with LeaderCore, because they like just focus on the one thing.
Yep.
And then you just take it out and apply it and come back, and then just focus on one thing again. And like that's man, I think that might actually create that action and that transformation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I look at that and I think, man, how spoiled are we in Eugene to have that? That option to. You don't have to fly to the other side of the country to go to a conference. You don't have to and get flooded with information, not really know how to put all of it into action.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we talked about, was having this clarity of like how to take action. And so from these conferences, it's hard. And so, yeah, I agree. That's what's fantastic about what Andrew's doing.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to downplay, this is not as good as that. But I think each style of conference has its place, right?
Yeah.
So I absolutely loved going out to LA, just the experience of being out there, the experience of just being around other creators, and really just diving in and seeing how people do their craft. So that was neat. But I think that if you're really wanting to make a change and really take it back and make that impact, something like what he's got set up, it should be something that should be popping up on people's radars.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I feel like that was a lot of the takeaway I had from going to my conference, was the fact I made some great connections. Mm-hmm. Networking was phenomenal. Did not skimp on that. Yeah. And I got to see people share their craft and do that sort of thing, and that was really cool. But had I had the opportunity to have something on a smaller chunk basis where I could continually chip away at that, that would be so cool. So I'm excited. Are you going to go to in September? I mean,
Yeah. I was there at the very first one that they did, and small. I don't want to say small. I think there was like 50, 60 people there.
Yeah.
And with time, I'm sure it's going to grow. But it really just felt personal.
Yeah.
And just like he was saying, it wasn't really just him at the front and him and his team at the front, but it was really making everybody at the tables do it themselves, right? So
Right.
It was groups. You still got to network, but it was just to focus on that one single thing that was super impactful.
No, I think that's great, and yeah, I hope I'm gonna be able to make it in September as well. We were chatting earlier, like, hey man, I'm like a solo business owner here that what can a leadership conference do for me? I don't have employees, I don't have a boss.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see how I can implement some of that stuff into my own life, personally and professionally.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot, and hope you're able to attend that conference in September. It sounds like a great opportunity for employers and employees. So we'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.
This episode of the Eugene Morning Hustle podcast was brought to you by the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce and sponsored by Ivan Torres of Business Block Studios and Brandon Miller Voiceover. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel where you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in the know. If you have any questions, topics, or guests you'd like us to dive into, send us a voice message on the Eugene Chamber Instagram page, and we'll feature you and your question on a future episode. Or shoot us an email at podcast@eugenechamber.com. Till next time, Eugene.